I think the best way to explain the practice of mass offerings is to take an example, a positive and a negative part of it. Firstly, I would think a very good example of the best in the practice is if I want to convey to a dear friend who is very ill the concern that I have as a person of faith, and that person also being a person of faith, Mass card is an ideal way to communicate that. On the other hand, if I merely want to say that somebody, let's say, has a bereavement, and I want to say, sorry for your trouble, I think a Mass card is not quite the right thing. What I would prefer to do in that case is pick up the phone, talk to the person and say, look, I want to share with you the fact that I do feel your grief and so on. Or maybe write a little note, or maybe send a card of a different kind. Well, now that question is actually a follow-through question to the last one, and it's very relevant. The how is quite important in this case. If I want to get a Mass card in the traditional sense, where I understand that a priest is going to celebrate a Mass at my request, the only way I would recommend is a person-to-person agreement. So in other words, I would say always find a priest, understand from that priest that he is going to personally celebrate, or else he's going to ensure that the Mass is celebrated. On the other hand, now there's a negative side to this one as well, and that is, if I decide I'm driving past a petrol station, I think I'd like to send some kind of a greeting there to somebody, and I pop in and I pick up a card, I have no assurance whatsoever, I have to tell you, that that is going to end with the Mass being celebrated. So I would think that is not the right approach. That is not the way to do it. Well, some priests receive a lot of Mass offerings. Some don't. But I want to say this, in relation to Mass offerings, this is one of the rules of the Church which is extremely important, and every priest who has been through the process of preparation for priesthood understands that the law is very strict. It's very clearly outlined, so he has a serious obligation to make sure that he fulfills that commitment. So I would say, normally, you could trust every priest to do that. Well, I would say that over the years, the missionaries of the Church have been enormously dependent upon Mass offerings. Well, not only the missionaries who originate in Ireland, but I'm talking about priests who are ministering in developing countries. And they don't have access to Mass offerings. And most of them, I'm sure, again, would diligently fulfill the obligation once they take it on. It could be the equivalent of something which would keep that priest in food and other things for an entire day, whereas back in our own country here, it would not be that significant. So it's a very, very important way of supporting the missionary work of the Church. Well, a long time ago, made it very clear that sale of Mass cards in commercial outlets was not appropriate. And that was crystal clear. The Bishops' Conference, the religious orders, the Irish Missionary Union, all signed up to that. And that was announced throughout the country, and it was made absolutely clear that that was something we did not want to continue. And there was a strong appeal made to bring to an end any such customs where they had developed. So that's unchanging, and that, as I see it, is the way to see it for the future as well. Well, a priest-signed Mass card, if I go back to the first statement I made about the proper way to make that arrangement is with a person-to-person meeting. The pre-signed Mass card very often is the signature, which is printed on the card, is from somebody at the other end of the world. I don't know, and in fact I'd be very doubtful about sometimes whether you could actually be certain that that person is going to fulfill that commitment. And that, for me, is the bottom line. I would not trust that system. Well, the Church's law doesn't require the approval of the state, let's put it that way, firstly, and I think that's important to say. On the other hand, we welcome the fact now at the present time that the state has intervened in this matter, and the state is saying that the only person who should be regarded as a legitimate person to sign Mass cards is somebody who has the approval of a bishop. If that's not there, well then that person is not entitled to do that, and that's in breach of the law.